you do not understand white supremacy, what it is, and how it works, everything else that you do understand will confuse you. In all of these 9 areas of activity, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. Anywhere on the planet, minute by minute, day by day, all of the time,
Good morning and welcome to the July the 20th edition of the Counter-Racist Code Show, also called the CRCS, with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. Thank you for tuning in. It is not a mistake that you are here. To get in contact with the show, dial 516-453-9921. Be sure to press the number 1 button so that you may get in line and I can take your calls. You can also Gmail me at the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com. And it will not be read today. Let's just put it like that, because we have so many that we are backlogged, but we're working or efforting to get those read. So if you would like to do that, you can. Chat room is also available. Mr. Emery Lumumba is in there. Thank you, Emery. And callers are on the line, so that's good. Let's start off by saying good morning to Mr. Fuller. Good morning, Mr. Fuller.
Good morning, sir.
And Mr. Fuller, how are you this day?
I'm still learning.
You are still learning. Very good. Okay, let's get right into the show. I've got a question and a sort of quasi-VGQ from Daryl. He says this, Mr. Fuller, Mr. Bobby, last week somebody called in and asked you a question about the vaccine, but you used the code word jab, J-A-B, instead. Neither of you knew what the lady caller was asking about, so that's what she meant. The jab is another way of saying the vaccine, just as the shot is as well. We as black people on social media have to learn how to become codified in our language, especially around things such as the vaccine, the LGBTQ plus community, and Jewish community. Our pages get flagged, taken down, and suspended if we say anything slightly critical of the, quote, jab or those communities. This is an unprecedented form of censorship, the likes of which we ain't seen since the McCarthy era, IMHO. Mr. Fuller, I know you were around during the McCarthy era and can recall when folk were, quote, whitelisted, in the quote, by the government for so-called being communist or communist sympathizers. This government today acts as if speaking against, quote, the jab, end of quote, is like speaking against God. You can lose your job, get kicked off social media, or be labeled a pariah. So, Mr. Fuller, can you speak to what you remember about living during the McCarthy era and what it was like, especially as a black person, and how it may compare to today? I thank you for taking my question, Daryl.
Well, yes, I was existing during that time, and I heard a lot about it. I saw a lot of people being questioned about it, a thing called communism. Are you now, or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? That was kind of like that was the standard phraseology, if I remember correctly. And at the time, I had been studying, Mao Zedong. And, I read a book called Red Star Over China by Edgar Snow. I didn't get any idea too much about what the ideology was. And I got a hold of a book called The Communist Manifesto, and I couldn't make too much out of it. I did read it, but even today I don't really understand most of what I read. And most of what I read from the book Red Star Over China by Edgar Snow was about some people in China called communists who were fighting the Japanese and also fighting against what was called Chinese nationalists under Chiang Kai-shek, Generalissimo. But other than that, I just learned about tactics and what people were going through and the events that were happening. That's mostly what I learned. And then there was a lot of talk about Stalin and Marxists and Leninists. And I wound up in the 1950s, really early 1950s, while I was at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, as a soldier. I was a sergeant there that they didn't know too much about what to do with because I didn't have. While I was in Korea, I was made sergeant, but I didn't have any skills on the cannons that we were firing, the 155 millimeter and the 105, because I didn't stay on them long enough except just in training, because I was mostly just doing telephone work and reconnaissance work while I was in Korea. But we were supposed to be fighting the communists there. And so we had what you call indoctrination or information officers there telling us what to do and what not. So at Fort Sill, they made me an information officer, and they gave me a lot of materials on Yugoslavian communism. And I was in what they call a segregated unit at that time, the 2nd Field Artillery. And they assigned me to that after I got back from Korea, fighting alongside, so-called. I mean, I wasn't doing any shooting, but being on the telephones alongside of a lot of white guys and some black guys assigned to the unit, 955th Field Artillery Battalion in Korea. And we were supposed to be fighting communists, North Korean communists and Chinese communists. In the year 1951, and right on into 52, that's when I was there. So I heard plenty about communism, and then back here, the McCarthy era, everybody was talking about communism, this, communism, that. And I was talking about, as an information sergeant, Yugoslavian communism to a bunch of sleepy, dreary-eyed, worn-out black soldiers who were listening to it, and I was droning on for at least an hour or two a week. And to this day, I have no idea of what I was talking about. And that's the punchline. Mm-hmm. I have no idea. I was talking about communism in Yugoslavia under Marshal Tito. And I have no idea of what I was talking about then. And in retrospect, looking back, I have no idea now of what I was talking about then, or if I talk about communism right today, I have no idea of what I'm talking about. I mean, when you go into detail, communism, yes, capitalism, socialism, except within the context of white supremacy. Now, I understand communism and capitalism and socialism there, because I came to the conclusion after many years that the white supremacists are the strongest and most powerful and the smartest capitalists in the world. They're the strongest and most powerful, the smartest communists in the world. They have more in common with each other than anybody, work together in a communal fashion. If you just look at the word itself and look at everything associated with the word, common, 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 what do you have in common? Well, they certainly got it. And socialism, they socialize with each other more than they socialize with anybody. They avoid what you call socializing with black people, because they don't think it's anything to gain, which is true.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the context in which I see it. The white supremacists are the greatest capitalists, communists, and socialists that the world has ever seen, the most powerful. So when you think about capitalism, communism, socialism, just say white supremacy and be done with it.
Okay. All righty. I thank you, Darrell, for your question. Moving on here. This comes from BD. Says, I haven't been listening to the show of late, but I have a pertinent question for you, Mr. Fuller. In the last few years, black-on-black violence has skyrocketed more than in the news, and more than in the news, ever in the news. Little kids, elderly, and black women are getting hit by stray bullets and killed at alarming rate. Everywhere you have black people, you have senseless violence. Are we inherently violent, or are we just that pathetic of a people?
Well, I don't know about inherently, depends on how you use that word, but we've certainly been taught by somebody to be violent, and it's glorified in everything around us under the system of white supremacy, and that's for sure. I have said on this program many a time, you can't turn on television and switch channels all over the place, day and night, 24/7. I've given illustrations, I think, on just a couple of programs before this one. I said you can sneak up on the television at night, peep around the corner and sneak up on it and turn it on, and with the sound completely off, just start flipping channels. And what do you see? Violence, violence, violence. Some type of violence going on, mostly in the form of what you call entertainment. And a lot of the video games, I understand. I haven't seen any of them to pay enough attention to them, but I think I've paid enough attention to what I've heard about. Video games are about violence. People killing. Looking around for somebody to kill and kill them. But killing people is a wonderful thing. And all during the time I've been on this planet, I used to read everything from the Hardy Boys to Raymond Chandler and Dashiell Hammett and Agatha Christie. I never read Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie, but that was a real popular book. And books by Earl Stanley Gardner. That's another one. And then there were, just numerous books about cowboys killing Indians. It's all over the place. Go to the movies. I've sat right on the front seat, paid my little nickel, and if I had another nickel to spare, I get a 5-cent box of popcorn, and in Muskogee, Oklahoma, sit at the Grand Theater and try to get a front row seat and look at Hopalong Cassidy, Buck Jones, Tom Mix, Charles Sterrett, the Durango Kid. Bang, 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 bang. And, shoot him off his horse. Nothing like seeing somebody shot off their horse, mostly Indians. I mean, they come tumbling through the air, turning somersaults through the air and falling on the ground dead. Oh, boy, man, hey, wow. And I'm saying, hey, I'm for the cowboys. Kill them Indians, And then they would show Tarzan and all like that, all about violence. Tarzan and the ape man, a white man in the so-called jungle. And he had a little sidekick, a monkey, and a chimpanzee, I think, and Tarzan and Jane. White man, white woman. Great white gods of the jungle. King of the jungle, Tarzan.
Mm-hmm.
Violence.
Okay.
Violence.
Mm-hmm.
So when black people come up, hey, I want to be a gangster. I'm going to write a song about being a gangster. Now, who I'm going to be a gangster against? When you're a gangster, you're working against somebody. Well, everybody that I see that looks like me. That's the easiest route to go. So, hey, get me a gun, and as soon as I get to be, big enough to shoot it, start going around the neighborhood shooting black people. That's what I see on the video games. So white folks do it, and I can get a little fame. I get 15 minutes. Nobody pays any attention to me because nobody does. I ain't known for nothing. I'm just walking the streets trying to get attention. Nobody's paying any attention. So I'm explaining why we act like that.
Okay. To finish it off before we go to Darnell, he says this: how does single mothers contribute to black-on-black violence?
They don't really contribute to it. It's the white supremacists who set it up so that black females cannot be mothers. See, the white supremacists, the system of white supremacy, they became the fathers and the mothers, racist man and racist woman of the black people of the entire planet. We have illegitimate parents. We're not qualified to be any parents. We don't have any power. You have to have power to be a parent. You have to be able, you're telling your offspring what to do. And at a certain age, your offspring look back at you and say, well, who tells you what to do? You ain't doing nothing. Daddy done run off and mama ain't got no job, or she's pleading and begging to always have one. Begging who? Directly, indirectly, the white supremacists.
Yes, sir.
That's who she's depending on. And they ain't giving her nothing. So by proxy, they ain't giving me nothing. So I don't pay no attention to her. She's supposed to be my mother, but she ain't taking care of me. I got to get out on the street and hustle for myself. She can hardly hold these 2 jobs that she got that ain't paying nothing. Ain't enough to take care of me and my sisters. So that's where that is.
All right.
That's being in the prison called the system of white supremacy.
All right.
We're not qualified to be mothers and fathers. None of them. There's no such thing even as a black male being a black man. There's not a single black man that exists on this planet in 2021, not under the title of man. We are males, but we're all prisoners of war under the system of white supremacy.
Yes, sir. Okay. Be good one. Let's get on code. Produce 21 all in the house in the chat room. But let's go to the phone lines, and we're going to go with your first on the docket, Darnell. Let me see if I can cue you in, and you are there, Darnell. Good morning and welcome to the Counter Racist Code Show. What is your question for Mr. Fuller?
Good morning, Mr. Bobby. Good morning, Mr. Fuller.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
According to the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, Compensatory Counter Racist Code, Revised Expanded Edition by Neely Fuller Jr., on page 60, under Area 1 Economics, Time and Energy, why is it important for a victim of the system of white supremacy to focus their attention on the 4 suggested areas of activity? And that's my question.
Okay, Mr. Fuller?
Because that limits, that focuses, I use the incorrect term there. It's not a limit. It's really getting you focused. And that focus is not a limitation. It may sound like a limitation, but it's just four things that page 60, the time and energy, there's four things on there. That is to keep people from straying away from what I interpret as being their assignment on this planet. And that is those four things on page 60 of the textbook workbook for victims of white supremacy, revised, expanded, 2016 edition, page 60. Just four things. And the first one is what here? I have it here in front of me.
Producing
as long
building?
as white supremacy exists, yes. Use all of your time and energy doing the following. And it says producing and building, repairing, improving things, cleaning things that have a constructive value, and using those things for constructive purposes only. Now, that's number one. You're supposed to be producing something.
Okay.
In the use of your time and energy when you're put on the planet. You're supposed to be building, repairing, improving. Everything that you do under number one is supposed to produce a constructive purpose, a constructive result. Then the second thing is you study, like we're doing now, writing, asking questions, like we're doing now, exchanging views with others about how to eliminate racism and how to produce justice in all areas of activity. Number three, eat and sleep correctly and only as necessary. We can practice doing that. That we won't on getting that thing of being overweight. I mean, just because it's a so-called holiday, we got to just what you call pig out. And we get, we blowed up and began to look like fat hogs and whatnot. I'll keep doing that. I mean, we don't, we do it out of frustration a lot of times, not to get energy. And it's the incorrect food. Number four, engaging in sexual intercourse no more than 2 times every 7 days and using a minimum amount of time and resources in association with such engagements. Now, those are just 4 things. And I always tell people, when you get lost, when you look at the race problem and all like that, and you say, well, what am I supposed to be doing with my time and energy? I mean, I'm a black person. I'm in the ghetto. I'm a prisoner of war. Everything seems to be working against me. What am I supposed to be doing? I mean, what is it? Always go to page 60. You just want to get focused. And if you're not doing one of those 4 things, you're off track as far as, according to counter-racist logic, you're off track if you're not engaging in one of those 4 things, because that should be covering everything that you do every minute that you're on the planet in the system of white supremacy.
Okay.
One of those 4 things.
How did you come up with the last one about engaging in sexual intercourse no more than 2 times every 7 days? I mean, where did that come from? Because sex is the next powerful thing to the system of white supremacy itself. People are walking around thinking about sex, even if they're just thinking about what they used to do, or with older people thinking about what the young people are doing and trying to steer them in the direction, where they won't get in trouble over it and whatnot. Or you want to raise a big storm about anything at a meeting, you start talking about the trans sex and all like that. That'll set it off. Or if you say anything about sex anywhere on the planet, people take an interest in sex. Sex is extremely powerful, the most powerful thing according to the code, next to the system of white supremacy itself. So the white supremacists, they take charge of black people's sexuality, okay? But black people should be cautious about anything they hear that comes from them about what you should be doing sexually, because anything that comes from a white supremacist is supposed to make white supremacists stronger. So in that 4th thing, in answer to your question,
why did I put that on there? Because sex is so powerful. And so it is so powerful, it has to be harnessed, though, and steered in the correct direction. So you have sexual intercourse no more than twice in 7 days. Now, why did I put that kind of restriction on it? If you can possibly stay within those parameters, it's because you're supposed to be doing the other top 2 things out of the 4 things you're supposed to be doing at all times. Just 4 things. The whole time you're on the planet in the system of white supremacy, just 4. And so the sex is on the list. Mm-hmm. But when you're not having sexual intercourse, you're supposed to be doing number 1 and number 2. And, of course, number 3, because you do eat for nourishment and whatnot, but you eat only when necessary and eat correctly, meaning eat the correct foods that will give you more of energy for the time that you're here.
Okay. All righty. Tell you what we're going to do. We're going to take a little station break here. You are listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. If you would like to get in contact with the show or have a question, just dial 516-453-9921 and press the number 1 button, and you will get in line so that Mr. Fuller can answer your question. I would ask, ma'am, I would ask, sir, that your questions be short and concise so that Mr. Fuller can have adequate time to properly address your question. And the same if you have a VGQ. Short, concise, so that we can hear it and get the show expedited. You could also Gmail me at the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com. And it will go into the archives, I guess you could say, where we will read it when we have time to read it. And then I will inform you of that and let you know. Chat room is available. J.J. Keller just joined the chat room. We thank you, J.J., for that. And you can get in there, and there's a lot of questions, a lot of responses. You can do that also and see. But anyway, we appreciate the fact that you are listening, that you're participating in this show, and we do thank you. In about 15 minutes, Mr. Fuller will speak about this book that we all should get, and if you haven't got it, you need to get yours. Okay, thank you, Darnell. Don't be a stranger. Let's go to some holler, and when I say holler, we're going to go to the dollar. That is Dollar Bill in New York. Dollar Bill, we got you, man. Go ahead.
Good morning, gentlemen. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
How are you? How are you both?
Still learning.
There you go. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. Mr. Bob, you cut me off last week, so please please keep me in on the line this week.
Okay.
I'm going to go back. Thank you, sir. I'm going to go back to the question I was asking last week because I didn't get to ask it. Mr. Fuller did do a great reading of the page I was discussing, which was in the area of economics, and where it was talking about how white supremacists are the greater or the masters of money. And Mr. Fuller, you really explained that so well. I want to thank you for your words last week. But my question regarding that was, and I have one more, Mr. Bobby, because you're only one for this. But my question was that for that paragraph or that area where you're talking about the masters of money, should we become masters of money?
No way to do that in the system of white supremacy. That's why I wrote the entire code book. You have to get rid of the system of white supremacy. It's like Michael Corleone saying about a character in the movie Godfather 1. He says, you got to get rid of this guy Sollozzo because all the New York gangs are following him, and they're following him on the premise that Sollozzo is going to get rid of my dad. Sollozzo is going to kill him. And then everything else falls in place. So everything is built around what Sollozzo does. So if Cilantro is going to kill my father, and he's become the dons of all the dons in New York City and all the other places, all other branches of the 5 families and all the rest of the families in different cities, crime families they call them, then everything falls in place if we get rid of this guy Cilantro. So it just comes down to focus about what do you have to get rid of. See, because we are black people, hey, everybody needs money, but you can't handle no money within and make plans in the system of white supremacy and say that you're going to get some type of monetary system that they don't have absolute control over. That's not going to happen because they rig it so that black people, even when they have piles of money, then the white supremacists just say, oh, well, we just charge them more, that's all. The money comes back to us anyway. They don't produce nothing. Not only that, we have made the entire world our prison. Prisoners don't have money, even when prisoners are given money in a prison. And lots of black people have been in a prison. They come into money, but they can only move that money so far, according to what the white supremacists want them to buy. They have, I guess, a commissary, what do you call it? Some type of store system in the prison itself where you can get small items and buy this and buy that right there in the prison. Commissary. Yes, that's what they used to call it in the military. Thank you. And so that's what it is. The world is just a big, place. And who runs the commissary? The company store, as it used to be. That's what it used to be. People familiar with the South, if you were a sharecropper and whatnot, I mean, you can get out there and work and work and work and work and say, well, now, I made more money this year than I ever made in any year. So when I go into town and buy a whole bunch of stuff, I'm going to be able to get twice as much as I got last year because it was a good crop. I got out there, me and my family, and we worked hard, sharecropping and whatnot. So we go to the company store, we go to town, and spend this money. It's going to go twice as far. Well, it turns out it went only half as far that it went last year. Now, why was this? The company store manager just simply said, hey, I'm just going to double the price, triple the price. See, that's how it's manipulated. The white supremacists are the greatest money masters because of what? They are the masters of the black people of the planet. So anything that is your master masters everything that you have, including your family.
Wow. Okay. What's your second question, Dollar Bill?
Second question, Mr. Barber, you can tell me if you read it. I don't think you did. I've been following. So the second question was, when people say, I am American, because this has been a little confusing to me. So this was the question I sent him. When people say I am American or African or Asian, why do you, Mr. Fuller, state that there are no Americans, Africans, and Asians if they are just using this as a place?
Well, you can just call it a place and make sure you're not talking about people, because there are no people who qualify for those terms. If the word Africa means anything, it's supposed to mean people who practice justice. If the word Asian, if a person says, I'm a proud Asian, what does that mean? So you're proud of being an Asian, or you're proud of being an American. What does that mean? What does that really mean if you're going to have a really intelligent discussion? Well, the first thing it has to mean, if you're supposed to be so proud of being one, it has to mean that you practice justice. And no one can practice justice in the system of white supremacy. You can't have justice and white supremacy on the same planet at the same time. So there's no such thing as Americans and Africans and Asians. They don't exist. These are concepts because you're talking about people. You're not talking about a mountain. There's no such thing as an Asian mountain. The mountain doesn't know anything about it. Asians are, a mountain is just a mountain. There's no such thing as an African body of water. No such thing as African resources. Water is water. Dirt is dirt. No such thing as American land. Purple Mountain's majesty. That mountain is an American. What does the mountain know about that? Fields of grain. They have fields of grain in the Ukraine. That's a long way from what they call America, so it has nothing to do with a place. That's why, if it has something to do with a place, you couldn't keep extending it. At one time, there was 48 states. When I was very young, then my geography teacher said, we're going to add 2 more. Hawaii was one of them. Alaska was the other one. Now we have 50. I looked at my map. I think I was maybe in the 8th grade or something like that. And I hauled out the map. I said, Hawaii? They talking about from sea to shining sea. What sea? It had been the Atlantic and the Pacific. Now you got a state that's over there pretty close to a place called Japan and other places. Getting inching away or whatnot. South America. What is this? Oh, okay. And another thing about this America, they keep saying people are coming across the border. Okay, they're coming across the border. They're coming to where? Coming to America. That's where everything is. Got to get to America. Well, where are these people coming from? Well, some of them are coming from as far south as Venezuela and Colombia and Ecuador, of all places. Are they coming away from that far? Yes. And they're coming to where? America. Well, you look at your map and you see in big bold print, South America. How can they be coming to America and, you're already in it? Oh, yeah, but that's South America. I mean, that ain't America at all. Oh, that ain't America at all? And what's these places in between? Guatemala, Costa Rica. Well, that's what they call Central America. Well, they say people are coming across the border from there, too. Is that America? That's not the real America. We're talking about real America. Then here's another one. Here's the clincher. When they start talking about real Americans, they're talking about Captain America and all like that. John Wayne. And then you notice something. Oh, real Americans? Okay. We got it straight about the geography, what an American ain't. If he's coming across the border to America, then he's coming to the real America. Who are the real Americans? And, okay, now I'm beginning to see. John Wayne, Captain America, Captain Marvel. Oh, and what's another thing you notice? They're all white. Oh, so
yeah.
Real Americans are white folks. Yeah. Where the rest of you people come from? Some alien planet? You ain't got no business here. You ain't got no business on the planet. People who are classified as white, who are white supremacists, except as servants to the system of white supremacy. That's what all the rest of you scrap people are. Scrap people. Garbage.
Okay. All right, Dollar Bill, guess what, man? I'm going to keep you on if I can. If you get cut off, I didn't done it. Okay. Before we get to Marcus, and then we got Raymond down in the great state of Georgia. Victor, I heard you on the Carl Nelson show, so we got you coming up. But Mr. Fuller, from my page, Mr. Johnson said this, quote, I will be in the classroom during the show, but I would like to ask Mr. Fuller about ways I can weave CRT, critical race theory, into my 12K classroom activities. I'm worried about the social dynamics of the classroom devolving.
Okay, so the question was,
how can he weave the critical race theory into his classroom activity?
Well, see, now different people got different ideas about critical race theory. First of all, I don't really know what it is because I've been looking at television recently, and from what I understand, it goes back quite a ways. I thought it was a recent thing, but I understand that they have been teaching it in law schools for some time, and that's how it got that tag. I didn't know that until just a couple of days ago, or I heard that. That may not be the real history of that, but I can't answer that question about critical race theory. But I say a compensatory counter-racist code, you can definitely take the code books that I have written, the 2 volumes recommended, 2016 Revised Expanded Edition, and the Word Guide. Take those 2 volumes, they're all basically one book, and go from there. Just turn any page and start doing what? Asking questions anytime the subject of race comes up. Stay in the question lane. Don't start making statements, even though it's a lot of statements made in the book. Stay away from statements when you're discussing race, particularly here in this year, 2021, because there's so much confusion. And a lot of white supremacists are saying, don't bring that stuff in here. Or like one of the callers said, you might lose your job. Don't start talking about that race thing. So you go in and wait for somebody else to start talking about it, then ask for, permission to speak if you're going to speak. But mostly you listen. And when you listen, and if they're talking about race, now this is the codified procedure, in any setting, don't bring up race at all. But you can bring up the subject of justice, which means guaranteeing that no person is mistreated and guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. Now, that's the compensatory definition for justice.
Oh, okay. Well, isn't that on the same line as something you said, have been saying a few programs, which is just tell the truth?
Yeah, tell the truth, but when you tell the truth, you're using words. So what do you talk about? What do you use those words to talk about? And like I said, the main thing is ask questions. Don't make statements. If you don't want to get into a shouting match and an argument, you're not supposed to ever argue about anything if you're black. That's a part of the code. Don't get into an argument. Arguments are designed to do one thing: win arguments. Conversations is what you want. Mm-hmm. Conversations are designed to solve problems. So so how do you conduct yourself and stop having arguments and have conversations instead? It's a scientific way of doing it.
Yes.
And to avoid arguments, stay in the question lane.
Okay.
Just ask questions about what somebody else is saying.
Oh, okay. So
But you got to remember, and don't argue about the answers to the questions. Just have another question ready.
All right.
That's the procedure. If you try it, you'll find out that's what works. Stay in that question lane.
Okay, question line. Okay, so on the line, if somebody brings up let's say the Emancipation Proclamation, they're asking you as a question, and they go on about all this, what happened, and so forth. On the line of telling the truth, okay, they bring that up, but they only bring up half of it. What about the D.C. Emancipated Compensation Act, which was a part of it? They don't put that in there in the history books. What about that? I mean, because if not, you're only telling half the truth. You said the Emancipation Proclamation, but what about the other half of it?
You just asked the question. That's it. That's what I mean by staying in the question lane. Just so that question you just asked.
Yes.
You just raise your hand and permission to speak, and that's the question you asked. What about the other half? You just asked it yourself.
Yeah.
You put it in the form of a question. That's all you have to do. Put everything that you have to say in the form of a question. It will always take the type of answers you get.
Okay.
Will always take everybody right where they should be. It won't take everybody where they want to go. But counter racist logic says it'll take everybody right where they should be. Questions and answers. That's all you got to do is just have enough questions and enough answers. I mean, when people try to answer, you're going to get to the truth. That's why the court system is set up that way. Questions and answers. Questions and answers. Questions and answers.
All right. Let's move on to Marcus. Marcus in Long Beach. Boy, you up early. See if I got you in here. You in here yet, Marcus, or didn't push the button?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay,
yes,
gotcha.
Sir.
Okay. Go ahead. Okay.
Good morning, gentlemen. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcus.
The question that I had today was in relation to the very last conversation that was being had. So Richard Sherman, the football player, if people have been following the news, has been arrested and then since released on bail. But I kind of didn't really read too much into that situation or try to make a comment because I didn't really get a full understanding of what was going on. And then also I've been practicing what Mr. Fuller said on this program not too long ago, maybe a few months ago, was I'm prohibited to talk about another victim of racism in a disparaging way, especially when I don't have all the information about what happened. So I've been practicing that. But when he came out on bail, he wrote an apology, and one of my coworkers, another non-white person who's also not black, he asked me, "Do you think Richard Sherman wrote this apology?" And so I said, "What apology?" So he showed me, and then it was a well-written paragraph, and then I said, well, I think that it could be his publicist that asked him to, come out and write this apology, because when you're an athlete of that status or something, you usually have a publicist that tells you to do certain type of things. And then so I asked the question, why do you think that Richard Sherman did not write this apology? And he couldn't really give me an answer. But then again, I also went ahead and said Richard Sherman is a Stanford University graduate. And then again, I asked the same question. Since he is a Stanford University graduate, why do you think that he's not equipped enough to write a well-thought-out apology letter? And then again, I still couldn't get an answer, so I kind of just left it alone. But my question is, why can I get an explanation on why other non-white victims of racism don't think black people are capable enough to basically understand, read, and write to a certain level of basic communication?
Your question is what now? That black people can't read and write basic communications? Is that your question?
Basically, why do other non-white people think that of black people?
Well, I don't know. I mean, when that's broad, when, different non-white people think different ways about different things. So So it depends on whom you ask. You know, which person? That's an individual thing. Which black person are you talking about? I mean, somebody might say, well, I understand it. I don't think that. And then the person standing next to him and say, well, why don't you think that? See, these are questions that have to be discussed between whomever is involved and whatever it is they're involved in at the time. I mean, there's no one answer because the answers will differ from one person to another, like on all subjects.
Okay. No problem. Mr. Bobby, I'd like to stay on the line. I'll have another question towards the end of the show.
Okay, I'll set you up there. Okay, thank you, Marcus.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Don't be a stranger. Mr. Fuller, it's book time. It's book time. We need to talk about, your book.
Yes, that's this program, and the program directs attention toward the books because that's the most orchestrated way. I always describe. Recently, I've been describing my volume, which is basically one book. It's 2 volumes here. The basic revised expanded edition of a compensatory counter-racist code about what the victim of racism can do about racism to replace the system of white supremacy with the system of justice. That's the focus. And it's in 2 volumes. And some people get the basic volume. Some people want the original too. And there's a word guide, which is optional, but it's an addition to the basic volume, compensatory counter-racist word guide, showing you what words to use, what words not to use, what lots of words to ask questions about when other people use them, like American, like African, like Asian. You want detailed descriptions of what they're talking about, all right? And I have my own definitions for them that I put into the compensatory counter-racist word guide. But basically the volumes are textbook, workbook for thinking, for speaking, and for acting. That's at meetings and schools, asking yourself questions and answering yourself and asking other people questions and getting their answers and then asking more questions after that. The book is supposed to steer you in that basic direction in order to do what? In order to replace the system of racism with the system of justice. Because when you move something, the law of compensation says you got to replace it with something. So what do you replace the system of white supremacy with? I mean, why replace it if you ain't got something better? But the concept of justice presumably would be better. That's guaranteeing that no person is mistreated and guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. Now, you keep this in mind the whole time you are reading from or using this textbook for victims of white supremacy. What your goal is to replace the system of white supremacy with justice, but then you've got to explain what justice would look like. It would look like guaranteeing that no person is mistreated, not for 2 seconds. If anybody's being mistreated ever, you don't have justice. Just one person out of millions being mistreated. You don't have justice. That one person's being mistreated. Nobody's supposed to be mistreated in a system of justice. You don't have any throwaway people. And then the other factor is guaranteeing that the person that needs help gets the most constructive help at all times. I don't care if it's 40 million people and one person is not getting the help that is needed, the constructive help. You don't have justice. Justice means all. Nobody left out. No throwaway people. Like in the system of white supremacy, you got millions of throwaway people. They deliberately throw away people and laugh about it. That's a part of the system. Write books about it. Brag about it. How many people they destroyed. Body counts. Come away from manufactured wars and say, what was the body count today? See, the textbook for victims of white supremacy is supposed to be against all of that. Sexual distortion. Having people running all over the place, saying, calling a brick wall sexy. And trying to have sexual intercourse with a brick wall if you can. This is where the white supremacists are leading black people into all kind of lunacy. And the textbook for victims of racism in all areas of activity, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war, is supposed to tell the individual black person, non-white person, victims of white supremacy, what to do and what not to do. Just suggestions, not dictatorship. And you pick and choose what you want and whatever you think works for you from the textbooks. And you can get the volumes by going to producejustice.com. That's producejustice.com. And like I started to say, I would rate my own volumes as the very best of the very worst written counter-racist guides that you'll find.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
My writing is not up to par. And I think a lot of people will agree with that, particularly English teachers and all like that, grammarians, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't pass that test. Very worst written, but it's one of the very best.
Oh,
and I like to think it is the best.
All righty. ProduceJustice.com.
ProduceJustice.com.
Okay. In the chat room, Produce21 said concerning critical race theory, said, I went to their website and read the definition 3 times. I'm still confused as to the end goal of this theory. Do they want to do? Why do they want to do it? How do they plan to do it? And what do they expect the constructive result to be? Then he goes on to say, but since black people contributed to this theory, I'm assigning it under the GQ. That's in the chat room. Interesting chats that take place in the chat room during the show. All righty, the first hour, Mr. Fuller, is coming to a conclusion. We have exactly 1 minute and 28 seconds on this countdown clock, so I'm going to give you that 1 minute and 28 seconds before we turn it over to the second hour.
Yes. Well, I hope that I have answered the questions. I will say that people are asking. And that's another thing on this program. I want to alert people. Sometimes Neely Fuller, all too often for me, in fact, all too often this happens one time. I really, in my search to answer the question, I have so many things swimming around in my mind and whatnot that I lose focus, which is why I judge myself every program, after every program, on how focused I was, clear I was in answering questions. And this is very important because the white supremacists are experts at asking questions and answering questions. In the system of white supremacy, they are excellent at it. And but I'm not, so therefore sometimes I don't answer the person's questions even though it sounds like I'm answering. So you have to be alert to that. Because if you let me get away with it, the white supremacists will run all over you.
Well, we'll put that under still learning, which you always say, still learning. Okay, that has come to the conclusion of the first hour of the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller. We thank you for your participation, your calls, your Gmails, and your chats. So if you have to go, then we'll hopefully see you next week. But if you are staying for the second hour, oh, baby, hold on, because we're going to do that in about 10 seconds. So thank you for listening. All righty, welcome back to the second hour of the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. Contact number is 516-453-9921. Be sure to depress or press the number 1 button, and you will get in line so that Mr. Fuller can address your question. You can also Gmail me at the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, @gmail.com. You can do that. Or you can get on the chat room, or in the chat room, and occasionally your statements will be read. I'll read a couple of them, which we did in the last hour. And very good, very healthy conversations. VGQ's all in there, but it's very good. All righty, so let's kick this off. Let's go way down south to Raymond in the great, I guess it's the great state of Georgia. Raymond, you're on with Mr. Fuller. Good morning, and what is your question?
Yeah, good morning. I have a VGQ and a short question. My VGQ is I see a label, a new label of the LGBTQ, a plus sign, and A plus community. So I'm really confused. So I'm saying whenever they choose to add an F, then maybe I'll get, me and other people might get more clarity. Anyway, that's my VGQ. My question today is to Mr. Fuller is, you say ask the person that used the term. So I'm asking you, Mr. Fuller, why you say why is very important in all racial matters. I'll take my answer. Keep listening.
All righty, Mr. Fuller.
Why I use the term white?
Why, WHY? Why is one of the important questions to be asked in all racial matters.
Wait a minute.
He says you always ask the question, why? Why? W-H-Y.
Oh, yes. I mean, that's the most important question. There's a reason. There's a reason for everything. So you always want to know, when you're talking about what people do and don't do, there's a reason. So you always want to know the reason. What's the motivating force? What's the reason? And you can ask that about even what you call inanimate objects. Why is it that they're shooting star? That star has been sitting there for 40 trillion years. If anybody has the skills to measure how long that star has been sitting there. And all of a sudden, on a summer night, in a summer sky, very clear, no smog, that star takes off and what you call burns out. You know, walking down at age 13, a country road, I've looked up and I've seen them on what you call clear nights back in the old days before they had all this smog and whatnot and air pollution. Sometimes you could see a whole sky on a summer night walking in the country. You look up, the sky is covered with stars. But every 5 or 10 minutes, you would see one take off, streaking across the sky. And as a younger child, I'd ask the question, what is that? They say that's a shooting star. Well, the star really isn't shooting, it's just moving. But we're using the language of the white supremacists. Everything is about shooting, you know, shots. I mean, you take a shot at a job. They'll even call hunting a job, taking a shot at this job, taking a shot at that job. But that's another story. But a shooting star, you ask why. Why did that star sit there for 10,000 years, 10 trillion years, 10 million years, 100,000 years, and then suddenly take off and burn out? And the rest of the stars didn't. And will you ask why? Okay, that's the first step toward knowledge or toward learning. Asking why this, why that. Babies come into the world asking why. Why me? Why dump me off in this mess? Because they can sense it. That there's something going on that shouldn't be going on. And that's because the world is a mess. And babies all over the world, they can't even speak any kind of language except baby language. And they speak baby language by yelling out. Now, I'm just giving a supposition here, a theory about why babies cry. Everybody should ask that. Why do babies come here crying and not laughing? It's because the baby senses that something is out of order. So they yell out as soon as they get that, breathe that air. Maybe it's something in the air that they breathe. That they say, "Hey, this is some terrible stuff. I mean, why dump me off here? Wow!" So they let out a yell, and we all smile and gather around the baby. But the baby is yelling. The baby is in pain, emotional pain. Long before the baby even knows that the baby is having pain or that the baby is yelling. But there's something in the universe. We can ask, why is it that babies come into the world yelling rather than laughing? Come here crying, all of them. We can ask that question. Why? And we can come up with an answer. That's what you call gaining knowledge. That's why that word why is so important. Why this? Why that? Why is it I can eat an apple, but I can't eat a rock? Why? When you ask that question why, you're becoming what they call intelligent. Because when you're really serious about the whys, you're going to try to find out.
Okay. All righty. There you go, Raymond. Thank you. Do not be a stranger, my brother. Appreciate it. Mr. Fuller, Transcendent wrote in the chat room, and I haven't watched this. I believe you have, Band of Brothers. It said in the 7th episode, the breaking point, the Easy Company remains in the Adirondacks forest, preparing for an inevitable attack on the German forces in the town of Foy. However, morale is low due to cold weather, constant shelling, poor leadership, and numerous casualties. Mr. Fuller, if the Band of Brothers have each other in the fight of war, what do we victims have? Is the code to a Band of Brothers in war?
Yes, but the code is you don't really band with people. See, that's why I call it the United Independent Compensatory Code System concept. I think that every person should band with their purpose. We're born in the world at a certain time. And I think everybody asks, what am I doing here? Why was I born at some time in your existence? You may, get into that word why again, ask yourself that question. I know I have on many occasions. Why was I born this place at this particular time with this color in my skin? Why was I born me and not somebody else? Because at a very young age, I wanted to be somebody else. Who was that somebody else? whomever I saw who was a so-called hero or something like that. I wanted to be Superman, Batman. Next week I want to be Red Rider. I want to be Hopalong Cassidy. I want to be some space creature, because he's all powerful and doing something that, that I wasn't doing. Yeah, I wanted to be all of that until I got to the place where, what about me? Who am I? Why am I here? We ask that question. And so that is important to find out. And so I came to the conclusion, I'm here to solve problems. What problem? The one right in front of me. What problem is right in front of me? What problem engrosses me? What problem do I have that is my biggest problem? I came to the conclusion, somewhere getting to be almost 30 years old, I just got one problem, really, and that's the system of racism. So that's my assignment. Here I am, about 27 years old, on a mountain in Japan. And I said, yeah, this is an assignment. No wonder my mind is all over the place. I haven't been on my assignment because I noticed that people who were on their assignment, people I was hearing about at that time, like Dr. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and Elijah Muhammad and Cesar Lawrence Tucker and this Daisy Bates and Gloria Richardson, who recently passed, and this a long list of people. I noticed that dark-skinned people made more sense when they're fighting racism than at any other time that they made sense. All over the world. If they were doing anything other than fighting racism, they usually didn't make sense, or they were just kind of people that just kind of passing through and doing this and doing that, and it didn't add up to much. But just, looking forward to a weekend and having what they call a good time, and going down country roads or walking around in offices in cities. But they're not doing anything special, anything outstanding. All of the outstanding people, Booker T. Washington, W.B. Du Bois, Marcus Garvey, it seems like they were involved in doing something dealing with racism. So I came to the conclusion, yeah, that's in capital letters. That's the assignment.
Okay.
If you have color in your skin. That's the assignment. You don't have any other assignment. Getting rid of racism and replacing it with justice.
Now, before we go to Victor in Canada and John and any other person, make sure that you, if you have a question, that you press that button so I can get you in. Before we move on, the question was asked by Let's Get On Code from the chat room, Mr. Fuller, said this: how do we discover our assignment?
By talking like this, trying to find it. How do you discover anything? Trying to reach out, first of all, what am I here for? And if you just go through a whole list of things that you can be, I wanted to be a cowboy at one time, and I looked at that and be a cowboy, herding cows and shooting people, who were trying to rustle my cows. Well, that's very entertaining, but what am I here for? Mm-hmm. I kept coming to the same conclusion. You're here to solve problems. That's what you're here for. Otherwise, you wouldn't have problems. Whatever created us put us here to solve problems. So what problem does a black person have more than any other problem? The one right in front of you, the one that engrosses you every day, and that is racism. So you get rid of this thing called racism, now what you got? Well, you're supposed to replace it with something. That something being what? the logical thing would be justice. Why? Because racism is the biggest stumbling block to the production of something that has never been done, of a thing called justice, guaranteeing that no person is mistreated and guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. That's the compensatory definition for justice that I put in my book, because I made that definition up.
Okay. By the way, good show. Wasn't last week, but when you were with the Carl Nelson show, I reviewed it and the questions that were asked on that, including that critical race theory question, and the person who I think he did some research on that, who came up with, who coined that term, critical race theory. But it was to me, it was an excellent interview. So do you know when you'll be back on the Carl Nelson show?
I don't know. I haven't been notified yet. Usually I'm notified in the month in which it is. And once I do one for 1 month, and I've done one for July, I probably won't be doing another one until August.
Okay, well.
Now, sometimes, very rarely, they skip a month.
Okay.
That's very rare recently.
Okay.
But sometimes in the month of August, and I will have that on the website, producejustice.com.
Yes.
And I hope I get the information.
And the show was on there, as Brother Robert, one of our producers, mentioned that whole interview is on the website, our website here at producejustice.com. It was an excellent interview. Okay, here's a person that was on that show. All right, Victor, I'm getting ready to get you, man. Here you are. You're on, Victor. Do your thing. Wait a minute. Let me put you. There you go. Do your thing, Victor.
Oh, hi, Mr. Bobby. Hi, Mr. Fuller.
Good morning,
yes, sir.
Yes, I have two questions. On page 166, you have there, Mr. Fuller, you wrote, do your best to use all so-called constitutional law. And then you mention other things. And only in a matter that best helps to result in the replacement of the system of white supremacy racism with the system of justice, balance between people. And you also said white supremacy is not a victimless crime. So I think a couple of weeks ago you talked about systemic racism. A lot of people don't seem to think that white supremacy is racism and racism is white supremacy. So I'm trying to educate people on that white supremacy is the same thing as racism. So the question for you is, like, sometime I'm trying to use the constitutional law. And by the way, the compensatory code does work. I used it on the job in the area of labor. And now I'm able to try to see if I could get my job back, because they so-called discriminated against me, which really, they practice racism. So now I am unemployed. But the question is, how do I continue to use constitutional law in a way to help me get justice for myself?
Well, constitutional law was supposed to, I've been told by my 8th grade and 9th grade teacher, is supposed to be used to produce something called justice. So justice has never been produced in the system of white supremacy, but you do your best. You're always trying to produce something. That impossible dream, they call it. But you dream for the impossible. Lots of things that people said were impossible have been done. I've witnessed that in the little time I've been here on the planet. So you just use all words. Constitutional law are just words. So you use any word that'll work toward the production of justice. If it works, stay with it. If it doesn't work, discard it and find some words that do work, because words motivate people to do things. So you want to use whatever words you can by whatever definitions they have in whatever language you speak. Just pick out the words that will work for you and not against you. So you can use constitutional law, and should. Why? Because sometimes people will tell you, like some of the callers have said, you can't talk about race in here. Don't bring it up. This is not that type of discussion. So we're not going to have it. It creates too much confusion, too much argument, too much division. That's a word that they use a lot now. And we don't want all of this divisiveness. So talking about critical race theory and all like that causes divisiveness. So we're not going to have that here. We're going to tell you that right now. So you say, well, you ask a question. What can we have? Well, just don't talk about race. Don't mention it. RACE. Don't mention race or racism. And don't mention anything about systemic racism. Not going to have that here. Suppose somebody tells you that. Suppose they make a law saying you can't do it. Well, then don't do it because they're making a law. You're a prisoner of war, so you don't do it. Then you ask the logical question. What can I do? What can I talk about? You want me to talk, don't you, or do you? Yes, I want you to talk. Well, what do you want me to talk about? Well, talk about anything, just don't talk about race. Then you ask for permission. Can I talk about justice? And if they tell you, yes, you can talk about justice. Oh, now, okay. Same thing. Because that's what you're trying to get to anyway. That's what you're getting. You're trying to get rid of racism so you can get what? Justice. That's the logical thing. So if you can talk about justice, we can go to right. We bypass racism, go right to justice. Now, what is justice? Guaranteeing that no person is mistreated, and guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. That's the compensatory definition for justice. That's in the textbook. I've looked at different ways that you can use the word justice, including all the dictionary ways, and all of the ways that I have heard before I came up with this one were confusing to me. They were too abstract. I couldn't pinpoint nothing. But I can measure when somebody's being mistreated. Babies kind of sense when somebody's being mistreated. Okay? They may not be able to articulate it, but babies, 3-year-olds can tell when all other children got an orange and that 3-year-old didn't get one. The 3-year-old started having this puzzled look in the 3-year-old's eyes. Every day you pass over me. You come into the nursery and you give out oranges. Everybody gets an orange but me. The 5-year-old can see that. They may not say anything, but they know mistreatment. So you got to guarantee that no person is mistreated. And you got to guarantee that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. So you can just ask that question in every setting. Is there a guarantee, sir, in this meeting that anybody is not being mistreated? Because that's the goal even for having this meeting. Nobody in this room is supposed to be mistreated. And if they are, and if anybody is, hold up their hand and say how they are being mistreated. And we're supposed to get on it because nobody's supposed to be mistreated. Not for 5 minutes. Nobody on the planet. And it's the same. Does anybody need help? Well, everybody's going to hold up their hand on that one. But then you find out who needs the most help. And that'll be the same thing as eliminating white supremacy. You haven't even mentioned nothing about race. Mention something about justice. And when you mention justice, that's the same thing. You go right to justice. But you got to have those two guarantees in order to have it.
Yes, sir.
It's never been done.
Okay.
But we're supposed to be working on it.
All right, very quickly, Victor, what is your second question?
My second question is, as a victim of racism, white supremacy, I continue to experience cruel and unusual punishment day after day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And it's just, I have the compensatory code and I can call you Mr. Fuller and and you give us suggestions and ideas in the book. So just how do we just keep on going? I mean, if we're just being beaten up and being labeled criminal, without due process, and we're just labeled with all these negative things, and then when we try to do something for ourselves, we get denied, blocked here and there. How do you keep on going?
Okay, you keep going. That's what the law of compensation is. Look at the word compensation. It's a compensatory counter-racist code, meaning you make up for what's missing. You keep on keeping on. There's all kinds of sayings. I've said some of them on this air. When you don't have any sense, any money, and no friends, what's the one thing you do? Perseverance. You see that word come up every now and then, and quite frequently, really, people who persevere get turned down for a job after job after job. You hear people come on television talking about it. Oh, I wasn't no overnight success. I mean, I got turned down for a whole bunch of things. I got sidelined a whole bunch of times. I got disappointed. I mean, I can't count the times. I mean, these are people making personal testimony. But what's the one element that they find that you find to hear? I kept on keeping on. I kept on keeping on. Keep on keeping on. I just kept on. And they write songs about perseverance. That ant and the rubber tree plant. Everyone knows an ant can't move a rubber tree plant. But he has what? High hopes. High hopes. In the movie Shawshank Redemption, Enter the Frame told Red, another character played by Morgan Freeman, having lunch. And it says, hey, I'm not giving up hope. Because Red was telling Enter the Frame, hey, hope is a dangerous thing. Hope will drive you crazy. You're in this penitentiary. You're in here for life, double life, for a double murder. And you talking about hope? Hope will drive you crazy in here. I mean, you'll lose your mind. But Andy said, I still got hope. I mean, as long as I'm breathing, I'm going to be trying to get out of here. I don't care what the charges were.
Hold that thought, right, Mr. Fuller. Hold that thought right there. Hold that thought. Let's see here. Yes, here we go. We and you are listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. To get in contact with the show in the remaining 30 minutes, just simply dial 516-453-9921. Make sure you press the number 1 button, and you will get in line. There are a few callers ahead of you, John in Houston, but it looks like Marcus is back, so we'll get to those. You can also Gmail me at the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com. And you can also get in the chat room. We've had several chats posted and read. Very interesting today. You can also do that. And in about 10 to 15 minutes, Mr. Fuller will speak about this book that we've been speaking about the whole program. If you don't have that book, shame on you. But anyway, he's going to be talking about that book that we can get to help us get to where we need to get to. All that and more coming up right here on the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. Okay, Mr. Fuller, I'm going to finish up on that thought. You were mentioning basically in the vein of keep on keeping on, and you were referencing the Shawshank Redemption and the characters that were involved in that.
And I'm also quote Memphis Slim, which I do on this program every now and then. Song. I'm paraphrasing now because I don't really remember the exact words, but it's a blues song. Memphis Slim was a blues singer back in the 1940s and 50s, and he moved to France and stayed over there. But he wrote a song. I don't remember the title of the song, but I'm paraphrasing a line from the song. As you go through life, you can't help knowing. You can always get help, but only the way you're going.
Okay.
And that line stuck with me out of a blues song that he sang back in the 1940s or early 50s.
Oh, okay.
And as you go through life, you can't help knowing. You can always get help, but only the way you're going, which means what? Keep going in that direction that you think you should be going in. Hopefully it's the correct direction. And somebody will help you. You'll be turned down a lot.
Yes,
but somewhere along the way, you'll get help.
Pardon me for laughing, but it just makes me understand when you had mentioned on this program and other programs that you and I have been on, that song, it has nothing to do with what you just said, but it was just the way you said it, and I had never heard it, but it was, I told you that I love you, now get out. I don't know why that sticks in my mind. I don't know who wrote it or who said it, but it was so funny to me. I told you that I love you, now get out.
Yeah, black people talk a whole lot about love, and the white supremacists, boy, they pour it on when it comes to talking.
Yeah.
All right? Boy, you got to love, and it's all about love. Everything is about love. I mean, sex is really about love, and this is about love, and you got to love everybody. I mean, you come in here and shoot up the church and whatnot, you got to love that person. You know what I mean? Just love, love, love.
Yeah.
See, but you got to watch the way the white supremacists use the word love. Because, see, what they really mean is just that, and that kind of sums it up. I told you that I loved you, Negro. Now get out.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll give you tons of love in words. I mean, they'll tell you that 1,000,000 times. How many times you want to hear it, boy? Now get your black so-and-so out of here.
Yeah. Okay. All right, let's get to Gmail. And this is from Gigi. Haven't heard from her in a long time. But she says this, Mr. Fuller. She says, Mr. Fuller, does mercy and forgiveness equate to the suspension of justice?
No, justice is justice. Justice is love. Justice is mercy. Justice is compassion. Justice is economics, education, all of it, guaranteeing that no person is mistreated. That's what you got to be looking at. Nobody got mistreated. Nobody you ever heard of or didn't hear of. Nobody got mistreated. And the other part is you got a guarantee, underlying guarantee, that the person that needed help the most got the most constructive help in any area of activity. Economics, education, help in education, entertainment, the correct type, constructive entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war, counter-war. Did you get the most constructive help in any of those areas of activity, or rather in all of them put together? And the answer is supposed to be yes. Not at some time, all the time. Got the most constructive help in all of those areas of activity and was never mistreated. That's the type, they say, well, Fuller, you're talking about a utopian world. I'm talking about this thing called justice, if it means anything. Otherwise, stop talking about it. Let's throw justice out the window altogether. Justice is love. When you say love, you're really talking about justice. When you say apologize, you're talking about justice. When you say show me some respect, you're talking about justice. So why not just say justice, period? That's all I need. I don't need nothing else.
But
when
then
it comes to interaction between people, justice covers it all.
But then you said never ask for respect.
never ask for respect, never ask for love, and never ask for an apology. You can give an apology.
That's it. Yeah. Okay, yeah.
You can give an apology, all right, but that's on you. But you never ask for those three things.
Why?
Because those three things are supposed to be given without asking.
Okay.
You got to ask. It ain't no good no way. I apologize.
Okay.
In fact, the white supremacists, we are apologizing for slavery. That's what we're asking them for. Well, please apologize, almost with tears in our eyes, a lot of us. The code says, you don't do that. You don't ask the white supremacists for no apology. They'll give you apologies. They'll say, we got warehouses full of apologies. How many do you want? We got truckloads of them. We'll apologize to you, and we'll start off the morning and say, I apologize for all the terrible things I'm going to do to you today. I'll apologize in advance. So you've been paid in advance. So I don't want to hear no complaints the rest of the day. I apologize because I'm going to give you hell today. All right? And I'm letting you know that right up front. And I apologize for that hell that I'm going to give you. Since all you want is an apology, I got them, boy.
got a bag of them.
Yeah.
Let's go to Houston and Mom. A whole bunch of them. Let's go to Houston, and we got Big John. Big John, finally got to you, brother. There you go. Finally got to you. Good morning, John, and how are you?
Good morning, Mr. Bobby, and greetings, Mr. Fuller.
All right.
July 20th, 2021 is the 52nd anniversary of when so-called white man landed on the moon. That motivated Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson to create Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin, the premier, arrogant, phallic symbol of white supremacy. Now, could I ask you, please, Mr. Fuller Jr., as opposed to this other nonsense phrase, second only, I guess, to critical race theory of defund the police, may I adjust and modify it to say, how do we defund white supremacy? You know, the so-called white man is only motivated, activated, excited by money. Now, of course, violence is his primary use, instrument, and tool of operation. But how do we defund white supremacy, whether through VGQs or what sort of behavior modification do you suggest that the prisoners of war, so-called Negro, Black, or African Americans, can defund white supremacy? And I'll hold on the line for an answer. Thank you, Mr. Bobby.
Okay. Thank you, John. Mr. Fuller?
The entire concept of the compensatory counter-racist code, the United Independent Compensatory Code System concept, that's how you defund the system of white supremacy. You got to have the entire non-white population of the entire world have a constitution or a code, you might say, for countering racism and eliminating the system of white supremacy. Anything short of that is just playing games. I mean, you got to replace the entire system with the system of justice. In fact, you can keep the system of white supremacy if you're not going to find a way to replace it with justice. Might as well keep what we already got. We don't need another form of non-justice. So how do you defund it? Through the use of a code. Each individual person doing and saying things according to a code. Every victim of white supremacy, every prisoner of war to the system of white supremacy, follow a code, not a person, not Neely, Fuller, or nobody else. People die. They make mistakes. I make a bunch of them, and will continue to make them. I mean, you don't want to follow nobody who makes mistakes. All right? What's not mistaken is a rigid code. A code means something that always works. When you do it, it works. It works. It works. It automatically works. there are some things that automatically work. We have to find out what these things are and then enact them, enact all of them, and get rid of everything that doesn't work, that hasn't worked. Stop doing things that don't work. That's right down to the food that you eat. I mean, stop eating the food that doesn't work for you but works against you, because that's not food. That's something destructive you're putting in your body. Just right down to everything like that. That's how it's done. That's how you defund the system of white supremacy. It's not about money. The white supremacists are the masters of all of the money on the planet. The white supremacists, money is not something that the white supremacists are trying to get. They have money. Why? Because they have people. People are money. The best money you can control. If you can control people, you have all the money that the people will ever have. Why? Because you control the people who are trying to get money. And you tell everybody what money is and what it isn't. That's why they call it the slave trade. I mean, and black people have never stopped being slaves. It's all this stuff about Juneteenth and the Emancipation Proclamation, whatnot. Those are just words.
Yes.
That mark incidents in the system of white supremacy. All of it. The system of white supremacy is slavery. Slavery never ended.
Thank you.
Slavery never ended. Once the system of white supremacy was in place in all 9 areas of activity, worldwide, everybody who comes under the system of white supremacy is a slave. The people of color.
Yes, sir.
To the system of white supremacy. You're a slave. Slavery and racism is the same thing.
Same
racism,
thing. Thank you.
Slavery, racism. You're saying the same thing. Slavery is just a form of mistreatment, that's all, for somebody else's convenience.
Okay. John, thank you for your question here. Mr. Fuller, from the Gmails, and Marcus, I'll get you the last here. This comes from Studi. Says this: a Russian novelist and philosopher named Fyodor Dostoevsky once said, quote, "The best way to keep a prisoner from escaping is to make sure he never knows he's in prison." End of quote. Mr. Fuller, do you agree with that statement? And if so, can you talk about that statement as it relates to the system of white supremacy and why non-white people don't realize they're in prison? Thank you for taking my question. I'm still learning.
One reason we have this program is to compensate for nobody saying that the people of color on what we call the planet Earth in 2021 are not subject. Nobody is saying that we are, except just people like on this program, some of us, victims of white supremacy. If you're a person of color. Very few people are saying that. And the people who say it, like myself, are shouted down. So that does relate to that statement by that person. And I've heard that before in one form or another from other people. Yes, you keep a person from knowing what their real status is. They think they have one status. Many black people in 2021, many of them listening to this program right now, and who are not calling in, but they'll happen to be listening, and they'll say, "I'm not no victim of no racism. What's that guy talking about?" I mean, them people are stupid. If they just get up and do what they want to do, I mean, I do what I want to do. I ain't no victim. Don't make no victim out of me. I ain't nobody's victim. I don't take nothing off of nobody. See, so that's a hurdle right there. Because I just made a flat statement.
But it's a true statement.
If you're a person of color, you can call it what you want to, but you're going to do what the white supremacists tell you to do. I do know that.
Yes, sir.
I do know that. If I don't know nothing else, I'm not that hard-headed.
Or else what's going to happen if you don't do it?
It's a lot of black people out here who are going to die today.
Yes.
Because they're going to tell some white person with a gun, you can't tell me what to do. I'm a man. I'm free. You can't tell me to pull over. I ain't pulling over. And you ain't going to snatch me out of this car. I mean, I know my rights. Yeah. You're going to die in about 2 minutes, Negro.
Yeah. Yeah, get the teddy bears.
And that's going to happen over and over and over and over and over again under the system of white supremacy. All right? Now, you tell me you ain't no victim. Tell him you ain't. Or her, if it's a white woman. And you're black on this planet. Tell them you ain't no victim. Get in their face. And then back it up. I haven't seen it happen nowhere.
Like
I've even heard of it happening.
Like you said a couple of weeks ago, get the candles and teddy bears ready because that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, and the balloons. You might as well buy. Black people need to be in the candle and balloon and teddy bear business. I mean, we'd clean up.
All right.
Burning in front of the funeral home. We know that more than we know any script in any movie.
Have mercy. Okay, going back out to Cali, Long Beach. Yeah, I might catch a boat to go to Catalina Island out there. But Marcus, got you, man. Go ahead, do it again. Marcus. Marcus? No. Okay, Marcus. Do we have you? No. Yes. Well, they said you were up here, but I don't see you in here. Okay, Marcus.
Oh, wait. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah,
sorry. My cell phone was on mute. On mute. I heard the Catalina line, and I said I need to get there as well too, because I'm right across the ocean, I guess you can call it.
Got you, bro.
But
got you.
Given the last caller about it was about money, and then the email about our victimization status. So my question is, given how can we get black males and black females, specifically black females, to stop arguing about a broke nigga is what they'll call. I don't mess with broke niggas. You know, I don't understand that concept, because I take the position that the code takes that since we're beggars, basically we're all dependents on the system of white supremacy for financial resources. So what sense does it make for us to be arguing about who's broke and who's not? So how can we get the code, you know, to or how do we get that concept across more and more to more people so we can stop having that argument?
Okay, Mr. Fuller?
Doing what we're doing now and presenting the code book and you know, and just telling people that we are victims and showing how. And then proving it by just telling them to open their eyes and see if what you're saying is true. Just and if they say, well, that ain't true where I work, or that ain't true where I go, and that ain't true when it applies to me, then you say, oh. Now, and many people have said that. Fuller, you talking all this stuff about no white supremacy, man. Oh, you know, man, you're putting blinders on yourself. You're getting in your own way talking about you're a victim. All you got to do, man, is just just lay back, turn loose. Don't be so serious. I mean, and just do what you want to do. I mean, you'll be all right. I mean, just loosen up. I mean, you got all this stuff in your mind about something called white supremacy. I've had people on the podium when I've gone to make speeches sit right there on the podium with me and say things like that. I mean, at least one person who was very prominent. I mean, at one time back in the 1990s, I think. I mean, and just shouted me down using all kind of vulgar language. and saying it. But I understood it, and I didn't respond because the code doesn't allow me to, except to say that, well, he said what he said, so consider what he said. We're not victims, even though the occasion had been set up to talk about racism. And the person on the podium saying that I was saying this thing about white supremacy, and he said it didn't exist. But he came there to talk about racism too.
Yes.
And the whole seminar was about racism. And we were in what you call a black institution, this university. And we're not talking about racism. I mean, this university was set up, as a result of racism.
Absolutely.
And we're not talking about racism. I mean, and that was back in the 1990s. And you get the same thing today, so I'm very used to it. So in answer to the question, you just keep on keeping on. You can say, yeah, racism is the problem. It may not look like that to you. Because that's probably why you haven't been paying attention. But if you pay attention, you'll come to the realization yourself. And nobody can prove it better than the white supremacists, that white supremacy exists.
Before we get to your book here, lastly, could it be that is the reason why you make this statement often, whatever the statement may be? You said it's either the statement I've made is either true or false.
Yes. Yes, you make that frequently. I say white supremacy exists. There are millions of people who say, probably, I don't know the number, who say no. No, there's no such thing as that. That's just a cliche. That's just a slang. But there's no such thing as white supremacy. There's no such thing as systematic white supremacy. I mean, even at Neely Fuller and people like him, they're saying Neely Fuller puts it in capital letters, the system of white supremacy. But I keep on keeping on saying, yeah, that's what it is. It's the only government on the planet here in 2021. It's the only government worthy of being called a government on the planet. There's no such thing as an American government, an African government, or an Asian government, or any other kind of government among the people of this planet called Earth, other than the system of white supremacy. That's the government of the planet in all 9 areas of activity, 24/7. Governing everybody who has color, quote, unquote, in his or her skin, period.
So
now, that
when they
statement is either true or false.
Yes, I was getting ready to ask you. When they say that to you, do you ask them if their statement is either true or false, or they ask you that?
Well, you can ask them what statement do they make. And if they make the statement that, that white supremacy doesn't exist, and you can ask them, is that statement true? And I guess the answer would be, yeah, I made the statement. I ain't lying. I'm not making it up. White supremacy don't exist, and that's true. So what you do, VGQ kicks in then. If it's a black person making a statement, a person of color making a statement, you say, well, that's what you say, stick with it, and see how far you can get with it, okay? That's the test. See, I'm not the test of whether white supremacy exists or not. The white supremacists are the test.
Okay, before we talk about
you go around doing what you want to do without their permission and see how that works.
Okay. Now, if that scenario is there, do you ask them to prove the white supremacy?
No. You never ask them for proof. You just ask more and more questions. See, a black victim of racism doesn't have to prove anything to me. We're fellow prisoners. That's the logic. That's why I invented that term called VGQ, Victim Guaranteed Qualification. the black person who says racism ain't never existed. Slavery didn't exist. I mean, them wasn't no slaves. They were just hired hands. I mean, they were getting underpaid, but they wasn't slaves. Slavery ain't never existed. Black people ain't never been mistreated. I ain't never been mistreated. That's something that somebody made up. And if they were mistreated, it was for anybody who's around now is born. I got plenty of money. I do this. I do that. That comes under VGQ. You don't get angry with the person or anything. You don't try to shout them down at a meeting.
Okay.
You just turn, if anybody asks you, what do you have to say about it? You just say, well, he said what he said.
He said what he said.
Because here's what. The white supremacists prove their power. You don't have to prove nothing. As a victim of white supremacy, remember that. You don't have to prove nothing to another victim when it comes to racism. The racists will prove that white supremacy exists.
Got to cut it off right there because we got to talk about your book in this remaining 2 or 3 minutes. Go ahead, Mr. Fuller.
Well, all the things that I'm saying right now and all the things that have been said and a lot of the questions that have been asked and a lot of the questions that haven't been asked, some of the answers in the textbook, workbook for victims of white supremacy. I mean, you might just stumble up on them. That's how I tell people to read the book. Just stumble up on stuff. Don't try to read the book from front to back. You ain't got that kind of time, most likely, on account of the system of white supremacy. You got 1,001 things to do. Got to go pick up the baby and all that. Got to go to the grocery store. You got to go to that other job after you get off of this one. You ain't got no time to sit down and read Neely Fuller's big, thick book, 400 and something pages, and then if you add the word guide, you're talking about 900 pages. I mean, who's got time for that? Neely Fuller don't have that kind of time. That's why half of the time I can't even find what I'm looking for in my own book. So you pick up the book and try to go to whatever it is, the problems you're having at the time you're having. That's why I have it segmented into 9 areas of activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. Or you can just ramble through any of the pages, because a lot of the things I say on one page are repeated with different words on another page. I did that deliberately. It's called reinforcement of the basic concept, and to bring a recall, an idea that you, or a concept or something that you have covered before. Mm-hmm. Or you can just go to the back of the book, and there are quotations, many pages of them, and just read something and say, and think about it, and think about whether or not you can use it to solve a problem. Everything in the textbook for victims of white supremacy is supposed to be to help the individual person solve a problem. That's what the book is written for. The theory is, the concept is, if you solve every problem of the individual black person, you're solving the problem of all of the black people. That's what I wrote the book for. Okay. So you don't check with Neely Fuller. You just check with the logic that's supposed to be in the book. You can get the book by going to producejustice.com.
Oh,
that's producejustice.com.
Mr. Fuller, you got about 30 seconds, so you got the wrap today. Go ahead and wrap it up.
Well, that's just about it. And the bottom line for everything. Just go to the textbook first, and take the textbook and talk about it. If you see anything in it that's worthy, call attention to other people. This is how the word gets around.
Okay.
It's not just for me to sell books. I'd like to bring that price down to about $5, like somebody suggested, and that's what I'd like for it to be.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. Thank you, callers. Thank you for everybody. We made a lot of mistakes today, but forgive me. We'll try to do better the next time. Thank you for listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. Thank you, Mr. Fuller.
Try to do better. ProduceJustice.com.
Yes, sir.